Okay, good morning, Chevre. It's an honor to be here. Based on Hashem, I will go over some basic ideas in Kashrus that are negaya for us as consumers to be aware of. And at the end, you're welcome to ask questions. I just ask if you don't mind holding the questions to the end, because some things probably will be covered throughout the presentation. As a Hakdama Kolalis, Rabbi asked me if it's okay if everybody's eating. I said, Adrabah, it's better if they're eating, because they'll be oisik. So they'll be able to listen better. No, but all kidding aside, the mitzvah, the Indian of Achila Shtiebel is Ashpah Pnimis. So making sure that we have Kashrus Behidr is Ashpah Pnimis. And the Rabbi writes in the letter that Modedik Kashrus is Pel Zikah Hamidus. So there's a lot of ruchnistic stock, so to speak, a lot of ruchnistic value invested in this topic, in this Indian. Okay, to be practical, if we take a walk in a supermarket in America, more than 60% of the products on the shelf do have a hechsher. So for ein Zeit, there's a lot of products available with a hechsher. In the zweite Zeit, there are different standards of kosher certified products, and it would help us to get a little bit of clarity to know what's what. To start with, according to the FDA, an ingredient that goes into a product at less than 2% does not have to be declared on the ingredient panel. So looking at an ingredient of a product does not tell you the whole story. You can have an ingredient going in at 1.9%, which is higher than shishim. Shishim is about 1.6%, or it could even be less than shishim, but it could be a taima, and it wouldn't be batal. So you cannot tell whether or not a product is kosher just by looking at the ingredients. Plus, there's also an added issue, which is very often products are what's called hot filled. They're produced in a hot environment, could be produced on a hot keli. Again, it wouldn't say so on the ingredient panel. So, as we're going to learn, which segues into the next point, canned vegetables, for example, canned corn, canned peas, or the like, they need a hechsher because they're a cooked product. They're cooked in a retort system in a cannery. This retort system is basically an underground well. And that water, that cooked water, is used for many different products. So if it does not have a hechsher, they can use that same cooked water in a sealed can to cook things like clam, which is also the raisa, and would cause a blias isser. So any canned product that's cooked, by definition, needs a hechsher. Now, in contrast to canned fruits, for example, let's say it's canned pineapple, which are not a cooked product, if they're coming from a country that does, let's say, a large amount of fruits and vegetables, let's say it's coming from Thailand, and it's in its own juice, there's nothing added, it's not no sweeteners, it is acceptable without hashkacha. If it's coming from China, nothing's acceptable from China without a hechsher because they clone people there. So I don't do anything to the products. And I actually spoke to mashgichim who they found stories that would make people's hair stand. So, but if it's coming from a place like Thailand and it's just fruits, or Hawaii, and it's let's say pineapple in its own juice, it's acceptable. Rabbi Reiport's brother was a rav in Caracas. He told me this himself, that pineapple in let's say in fruit juice, or let's say it's just sugar and water, seems to be innocuous. Sugar and water don't need hashgacha, but it's a cooked kind of marinade. So you have a kalim issue. They could be cooking it at the kalim, and again, it would need an hechsher on that basis. That's what we say, only in its own juice. Okay, let's talk about some basic staples. Things like rice. Plain rice, if it's not enriched, plain brown rice, for example, does not require hashgacha. I advise people to buy rice in a sealed bag as opposed to buying in a box, because in a box, there's room for bugs to come and take habit inside, in the cracks. In a sealed bag, it's a sealed environment. Just mitzad teloim, it's a much safer bet. In America, we don't have to be choishish that rice is infested. In Israel, you do. It doesn't require b'dikas teloim. But you also have to be responsible. Don't let your rice sit in a hot cabinet for 4 months in the summer. But I'm saying if you take reasonable steps, it's not a problem. If it's parboiled rice or it's enriched rice, it needs hashgacha because it's already processed to some degree.
What's the meaning of enriched?
Enriched means they're adding vitamins to it. Vegetable oils need a hechsher because they are refined. Let me explain it briefly. I wrote an article about this actually in last year's Kosher Spirit. I gave a basic overview of how oil is processed. Most oil that we consume in our homes is a processed oil. It's refined. Refined means you have the crude oil, which is not edible, and that's, if it's coming from a kosher source, it's going to be kosher. But the way they refine it to make it edible, it goes through a process, and sometimes the refineries can also refine animal oils and use the same kelim, which could create a kashrus problem. That's why vegetable oils need a hechsher. With regards to oils, olive oil, if it's, listen carefully, if it's cold-pressed, extra virgin olive oil, it's acceptable without a hechsher, even for Pesach, for those that use olive oil on Pesach, because it's just a cold squeeze of the olive oil with nothing added. If it's not, it says on it, cold pressed, extra virgin. If it's not extra virgin means the first press. Cold press means there's no hot extraction. If it's not the first, it's more expensive. It's a premium product. If it's not cold pressed, extra virgin, it'll say on it olive oil. Sometimes it says pomace. Pomace is the lower grade olive oil. Those all need a shadim, but for year round, and kosher game for Pesach, because they could sometimes, some companies that have poor quality will actually mix in other vegetable oils, usually kosher, but mix in with them, which is also, by the way, derech hagadik, which is why you need it. If you're using those pre-made lichtelach for Hanoka, it has to come with a good hashkacha to make sure it's really shemesh zayizah. If it doesn't have a good hashkacha, it could have vegetable oil mixed in, which wouldn't be mahadran. Okay, I'm going through a bunch of products now in no particular order, but just for ideas close. Tuna fish, the OU has a policy, which is something that is not something that in other chassidim we accept. They allow skinless fish without a mashgiach tamidi, as long as the factory only processes kosher fish. So, for example, in Alaska, they do a lot of fish processing. They'll send millions of pounds of pollock there, whatever it is, and it's only kosher fish coming in. They'll run it without a mashgiach. If you have fish without simanim, you need a mashgiach to verify that it had simanim kashrus. They're relying on certain hetatim which are not really oisgal. They have articles on their website if you want to study it more at length. So we don't accept this. So plain OU, let's say it's OU, but when we tuna fish, some of the tuna fish even says mashgiach, will say on it Bishli Yisrael, because Bishli Yisrael has to be mitzad. There's no other way around it. They don't have it, but there's no mashgiach to me. The mashgiach would come in the morning, light the fire, and not watch the fish. The vayt is no good for us. It's a little tricky. There's a company called Wild Planet. It's Bishli Yisrael tuna, but not mashgiach tamidi. So it's again not acceptable to us. The only finish that's going to be mashgiach tamidi, we want with the okay, or the Starkey is also makbid on this, and one that has a chassidish hechsher. When the OU certifies the tuna fish for Pesach, then officially they would require a mashgiach mitzad chumer de pischa. So if you verify there's a mashgiach, then it could be acceptable for those shluchim that are living in Orei Yisod that can't get the hamish bread. When it comes to salmon is the only fish that they're okay is makel on, because the color of the flesh is a pinkish color, which is miyuchad to salmon, or the salmon or steelhead trout, which is in the same family of fish. While it's true they could potentially color even a white flesh fish into pink, it's not commercially viable. They're not going to make money doing so. Api halacha, you don't have to be choishish. They're going to do something that they're going to lose money on doing. So if hayos is not commercially viable, we're soymech on that by that fish alone to allow without a mashgiach tamidi. The fact remains that most locks available with a hechsher in America is on this, based on this heter. If you get one with a chassidish hechsher, it means there was a mashgiach tamidi there. But other national brands are going to be relying on this heter of the color, which Yoki relies on also. I want to also clarify, this only applies to the lox itself. Caviar is different, even though it speaks about this in Shulchan Aruch. Caviar, you could dye caviar from red to black, or the other way around, and it's easier to dye. It's a very small egg, and it's very smooth. It's easier to dye, and it's commercially viable to do so. So therefore, we don't allow salmon caviar without a mashgiach tamidi mitzad that time, because the whole letter doesn't apply there. Some hechsherim do allow it, but it's not something we accept. Okay, kashering. Just a general overview on kashering. Okay, we know that
so lox and Costco.
Lox and Costco on that, based on that heter. Yes, across the board. Yeah, the okay accepts it, but the Chassidish Hechshem don't accept it. Rabbi Marlo Lav Shalom told my senior colleague, Rabbi Stigner Lav Shalom, that you can do it, even though he didn't want to do it in his own hashgacha. Yibad L'chaim Tamaruchim, Rabbi Weissman also those we can do it. He says you have to monitor it to make sure that they're not.
Zalman Shimon had an incident where he caught that they were coloring the fish.
They do color the fish, but they only color the fish to enhance an existing color. They take fish that's, let's say, pink, they'll make it a darker pink, but they don't take a fish that's white and make it pink, because white fish is more expensive than pink fish. It's not commercially viable. They're not going to make money doing so. That's the whole yesod of the hefter, basically.
What about sardines?
Sardines, they need to have either skin on or a mashgiach tamidi. Okay, with regards to kashering, by the way, speaking of which, sardines are not considered to be a kosher fish, so visually it wouldn't be a problem, but you want to make sure that the mashgiach tamidi issue or the skin on issue is properly addressed. Kashering.
Does it matter that the chimer is by tuna fish because the dolphins with the tuna?
Yeah, they're worried about other bycatch. But they claim, yes, that's correct. It's davar chashuv, and they claim that they have ways of avoiding the bycatch. It's called bycatch because they have color sorters. They also have sizing sorters. But some tuna fish can be very large. I was in a fish factory once. They were carrying a tuna on a forklift. It was like 400 or 500 pounds. It's the size of a dolphin. So, I mean, that's more of an expensive grade tuna. I don't know if they use that for canned tuna. It's probably more for like a sushi grade tuna. It's a very expensive, it's like a prize tuna. But it could be big also. Okay, kashering temperatures. We know that there's an Indian of Dafka kashering at 212 in Ma'aseh Rebbe. Rabbi of Shapiro was in the kids of the Rebbe about that. The Rebbe said, the Rebbe, I can't get to 212, I get too close to that.
Say the whole Ma'aseh.
211, 210. Say
the Ma'aseh.
The label tells the story.
Say the Ma'aseh. Nobody knows it.
The story, I don't remember all the plot, but basically he was in Yichiz by the Rebbe. He was giving a hechsher on a Chol Yisrael in Cleveland. Rabbi Lippishver, yeah, okay. So he lived in Chicago, he was a Rav in Cleveland, and he was giving a hechsher, and he said to the Rebbe that he can't get the pasteurizer up to 212 mamish. So he said to the Rebbe, the Rebbe set up his 210. The Rebbe said, okay, like we can go with that, but not less. Like that was the 211, 210. The idea is it should be roischin. Now, if you live in a place like Denver, in high climate, it's going to boil at a lower temperature anyways. But generally speaking, you want to have, you're going to have to get to those temperatures to be able to have boiling. Other Rechshedim, the OU holds that, of course, it's more mehudah to kasher beischin, but they hold that if you're in a situation where it's difficult, they allow kashering kibela kach polti. For example, let me explain what that means. Let's say you have a product is cooked at 190 degrees. So they'll allow the kashering to take place at 195. It's higher than the bliya. So they're being semach on the shita that holds that kibela kach polti is not going on the type of bishul, but it's going on the temperature of the bishul. So if it goes on the temperature of bishul, so it's higher than bishul, it's not a problem. But if it's going on the type of cooking, so you still have to go to 212, so it's really not mehuder. So Rabbi Weissman told me that if it's not a ben yoimai and the kashering kibel kach polta, you can eat the product, but if it's a ben yoimai, it's better to be machmer. So that's where you get into standard issues.
What's the story with flash pasteurization?
If it's going to cook, if it's going to get to that temperature, it's acceptable. Okay, with regards to restaurants in general, I want to give people a general idea that the most challenging part of giving echshedim is the food service industry. The word food service is a shem klali. It refers to restaurants, caterers, butcher shops, takeout food. They call it skitzer. It's the most challenging thing because in such an environment, it's a very fast-paced, moving environment. The chefs can change very quickly. The recipes are not set in a book. The chef comes in, he decides to, just to move around the recipe, no problem. So you need a frum yid in a restaurant at all times. B'dikas Yirak is a big issue. B'shli Yisrael is a big issue. Ingredients coming in is a big issue. So it's probably one of the most sensitive areas of kashrus, and there's a lot of challenges in such an environment. So some people have a hakpada, I would say, to only eat in a restaurant where the balabas is a frum yid. Now, because we live in the tri-state area, you can have such a chumrah, because half the restaurants here are owned by frum yidin. So I would advise people, since we live in a place where we could take on such a hiddur, to take on such a hiddur, because if the owners are frum yid and an erlich yid, you're already at first base. Doesn't mean that you don't need a mashgiach, doesn't mean you have to do all these other things, but if the owner is a goy, or if the owner is lahavdil not a frum yid, it's a lot harder to have everything done because it's not the same kind of an environment. So even though all national achsher will certify restaurants or caterers that are owned by goyim or lahavdil not from yidin, it's not as mehuder if in the situation as the owner would be from. Okay.
When you he's saying is that the mashgiach needs to be there at all times, not
all times of operation. Now, some Echsherim will allow, but the Chassidish Echsherim, they allow this. If you have, let's say, a caterer or a restaurant that's owned by a Frumiyad and operated by a Frumiyad, they'll allow the owner to be their own mashgiach. The halacha that's mutter, the question then becomes about what kind of, how frum is the person, what we're dealing with. Okay, as a policy, based on Rabbi Levi's times, that even if the owner is from Metalamaylis, by meat, we don't allow the owner to be their own mashgiach. Because meat is a big nisayon, it's the thing. Other Chassidish Echsherim do allow it.
But he has an interest.
Hanochanami, but the Chassidish Echsherim all allow it. They'll check on him, but they have an interest. There's another thing to keep in mind, that meat, not only does he have an interest, the availability and the price of kosher meat against non-kosher meat is about sevenfold. The difference between wholesale trade for meat, retail kosher meat is about 7 times. So when the story in Muncie happened, I don't want to stel on it too much, but just to give people a perspective. When the story in Muncie happened with this butcher was selling trade for meat, Rahman Islam, to Muncie community for about 9 months or a year. Okay, he was ostracized when it happened, everyone had to kasher the Caleb. But people have to realize that an average butcher, I would say it's safe to say that a butcher makes about $300,000 profit a year. They work hard, they're entitled, yeah? If Chas v'sholem, he's nodding up to Olam for just 1 year, he made over $2 million. So if he's able to do that, and if he's so incentivized by the money, it's worth the risk. That's why you have to have a mashgiach, you have to have very tight controls, because it's a very big nisayon. It's not appropriate to, so these are things to keep in mind. Also,
restaurants, if you want to take on a chumrah, is it better to take on, not to eat, let's say, OU restaurant, even though they don't have a mashgiach committee,
no, the OU...
Or, I'm saying, if you mentioned before about Jewish owner, is it better not to eat OU?
Not just OU, all the ships certified restaurants
No,
are
you
good.
were saying about Jewish owner. I'm saying, is it better to stick with a higher standard hechsher, even though the owner is not Jewish, or go for Jewish owner, even with the lower?
It would depend on the particulars of the question, but in general, the OU does a very good job in the restaurants. Their standard is good. The question is only, you have to be careful. The OU tuna fish we cannot have in the restaurants because of that. But if the flesh is a good hechsher, and you know them as good mashgiach, they do a very good job of bdikas yirakis. Whatever they say they do, they're reliable. Okay.
Nichnas v'yoytz is not considered mashgiach committee?
No. Nichnas v'yoytz means nichnas means you're coming and going. Could be a few times a day, but it doesn't mean a tmidi. Tmidi means you're there all the time.
There's a place on the zone that says a klor and Zion.
By the way, there's a word on Yotze v'nichnas. I want to just on my word I want to share with you. Why is it called Yotze v'nichnas, not nichnas v'yotze? You have to first come in to go out. So the teretz is that it's Yotze v'nichnas. When you go out, the olam has to, in this case, the goyim have to feel like v'nichnas. You're going to come right back any time. They can't know your schedule. It has to be that sense of mirtas. But that's a general thing. A restaurant needs a frumiyad present. Out of town, by the way, some local vadim will certify restaurants. They'll have mashgiach coming in, talking Yotze v'nichnas 4 or 5 times a day. I'm not going to say it's usher, but it's not geschmack. It's not. It's sketchy. It's risky. Okay. Some raw things like raw nuts are acceptable without hashgacha for year-round use. Flour, because raw nuts. Roasted or processed nuts. Right. If it's processed, if it's sugar-coated, if it's tamari almonds, they all need hashgacha. But if it's a raw nut, even though they're pasteurized at the farm level, it's not a problem. It's dedicated equipment, no issue. I'm sorry?
Roasted and salted.
They need hashgacha, yeah.
Roasted already?
Yes. In order to salt it, has to be roasted because it won't stick otherwise. You can't salt a raw nut. Blended raw spices themselves, b'derech klal, don't need a hechsher. Even though sometimes they'll put in an anti-caking agent for a powder, so it's better to get a hashgacha. But if it's a spice blend, it for sure needs a hechsher because a lot of blends have things mixed in. First of all, blends can often have oils put in to prevent any dust issues, and also a lot of blends have dairy and whatnot, so therefore blends should have hashgacha. Okay.
Like a black pepper, even if it's
plain black pepper does not need hashgacha.
even if it's a fine, it's a double quarter.
No, because it's being ground on dedicated kalim. Also, cinnamon, by the way, cinnamon naturally has oil present in it. I just got this question from a mashgiach of mine. He said he found ground cinnamon in one of my factories. I think it even had a hechsher, but it was a different ingredient, and it had like 3% oil in it. It was approved. He wants to know if the problem has oil. I said no. It's naturally forming in the cinnamon when you grind it. The higher level the cinnamon will have a higher oil content in terms of quality. Anyway, okay, breakfast cereals.
What about frozen? When you have 100% frozen vegetables.
Frozen what?
Vegetables and fruits.
So frozen, that's a good question. Thank you for asking. Frozen, yeah, I understand. So frozen fruits, for example, frozen mango, frozen blueberries, strawberries, whatever. So there's no issue with kashrus if it's just a plain frozen fruit. But the issue could be if it's, let's say, frozen strawberries, frozen blackberries, raspberries, or badikas teloin. So if you're going to use it for a smoothie application, it's going to be finely pureed. Then I recommend that you rinse it once and then you can do it. Your kavan is not to be mevatel it, and darke bekach it's mutter. But to eat it whole would be a problem with teloin. But there's no kashrus problem with the fact that it's cut up. And with regards to vegetables, if they're not a davar charv, let's say it's frozen corn, peas, carrots, string beans, those are acceptable without hashkafa for year-round use. By the way, a lot of times they're blanched in the same kelim as chometz. So for Pesach, even those are kidneys anyways, but you have to be aware of that. So it's a Pesach issue.
Second, if it has an OU, you would recommend also to wash it, rinse it before you put it into a smoothie.
That's a question. Depends on the product. The OU certifies some products on the basis that they're going to be used for smoothies, which means you cannot eat them whole. They certify certain smoothie packets. So they're relying on the fact that you're going to make it into a smoothie. If you want to have it whole, you have to do it because for life. Yeah. Okay, breakfast cereals like Cheerios, Rice Krispies, what have you. Tasmaim has a tshuva on it in the back of his sefer. It's Kvadash B'Urab. And basically, the nakuda is that the way breakfast cereals are made is not a conventional baking process. They're either extruded, they're puffed, or they're steamed. So for all these timing, they don't have to be bishul or pas yisrael. But it's a vayta chumra because there's harbi tamim mahatir. So if someone wants to get the cereals with a heimish hashkacha, I'm not going to say there's no yesod for it, but there's no chiyuv. Okay, potato chips is
Cheerios is not a what's the
because it's also extruded. It's not
Paris Mayim over there, and Mr. Bush is talking about by cornflakes
Yeah,
and
Rice Krispies, yeah.
Because he says over there by the cornmeal and the bland.
Yeah,
but by Cheerios is different. Cheerios
It's
is
different
made-
because it's made from formation in a dogan.
Right.
But the process here is extrusion, and therefore it's not a regular. So there, pasanefa b'chama. It's not.
He said extrusion. Meaning to say that he's saying that by
What I'm saying is that there's a din with regards to pas. The chachamim only asked the traditional way of baking, which is in an oven, or kadema. But if you have something that's baked, let's say pasanefa b'chama, baked in the sun, or you bake something on the radiator, it's not pasapim. It's not a regular way of baking. So extrusion is a modern day way of baking things. They take, let's say, a doughy substance, they run it through a very small hot rod, and it comes out as small strands. That's not a regular way of baking, and the Chacham didn't answer that.
What about something that's steamed?
Steam is machlekes, but Minchas Yitzchak is matirit. In the base of Charesh, we're makel on that.
So then,
Didn't you show me the steam
go
is
back to the
bishul?
whole tuna, canned food. How is
Mitzad the
it-
bishul, you're right, because it's steamed.
Correct.
But you're still in the mashkiach to meet mitzad the fact that it's skinless.
Okay, so then it's not an issue of visual because it's steamed.
You're correct. You're correct. Although, if we have a mashkiach there anyways, we'll be machmir like the other shita. But the ikar issue is the mashkiach to meet. You're right.
So you can't rely on the government, that this is a tuna factory that can't.
No,
pass
not
something
because
else
al pi Allah, you have to check every piece of fish. So it says in Shulchan Aruch.
It's not bottled.
There's no bottle. It's also double chashuv. By the way, I had an interesting shaila. I asked our Pesach about anchovies. Anchovies are a paste. So he said there, because it's already made into a paste, it's not a whole fish. If you're chosh that maybe there was a bycatch of a non-kosher fish, then you could say bittul because it's already ground up. It's already not kosher anymore.
What is
Not very. Anchovies are small fish, but it's a certain kind of, it's a flavoring thing.
So they grind it up?
Grind up, yeah. It's a paste.
Back to the cereals.
Yeah.
That is, what do you call it, extrusion?
Extrusion.
Extrusion?
Yeah.
You can apply the same thing to granola, that granola bars would be how long?
Granolas are not extruded.
What, it's not?
No.
Granola, the way you make granola is one of two ways. You take 33% liquid, 66% dry ingredients. You pour the liquid over the dry ingredients, and they become ready to eat in such a way. So it's either b'kli, or you take the granola and bake it. But it's not extrusion.
So most companies are doing the yearly condition, or they're doing the...
Either way, and then they flatten it out. If it's a bar, they're going to flatten it out. Sorry?
If it's yearly condition, what makes it the Zaynus then?
There's a machlekes about the bracha. Some say adama, but a lot of granola is baked chatchila, not cooked first.
Isn't totally in the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe is machalek and brichas and where if it's surasa, because over here they're pressing it. They're pressing it. So based on the Alter Rebbe over there, it's in its entirety. It was never crushed. It was never anything. It's the actual granule was there.
And therefore
they're in the gabi the bracha.
And therefore the bracha should be
Hadama or shakal. Never mezenas.
I don't know. There's machlekes rabbanim about it. I'm not a mumcham brachas. I'm just telling you the messias. I see both processes being made. I'm sorry.
So what bracha do you make for the
Some say mezainis, some say adama. But in sad pas, it's not a problem because you still see the whole oats. The Rav that I asked about it said that if the whole oats are nikir, so then it's not considered to be an issa of the din of pas. Okay, the vitamin industry. I just want to touch on that briefly.
Please.
Vitamin industry is a very common question. People take vitamins for various reasons. Some people take vitamins because they want to boost their immune system. Some people take vitamins because the doctor said they should take vitamins. So basically, it's a very simple answer. If a person's taking vitamins because they want to take the vitamin inside their own svara, then it's more like food because they think it's good for them. But if a doctor tells you to take a vitamin, then it's a din of medicine. So in general, when it comes to medicines, a lot of medicine is not kosher. So we tell people take it in a pill form and swallow it. And it's mutter. That's the way you do it. If it's a vitamin, do the same thing. Swallow the pills. Avoid chewables. Don't take chewables because that's derech achila. And if it's a powder, so then if you're gonna mix it into a bunch of liquid, you could also be mevatel it in some capacity. But those are, so we don't, when something is not certified kosher, there's no way to know for sure if it's kosher. You can't know. You can know what the risk level is. So sometimes people ask me about a particular vitamin, doesn't have a hechsher, they have to take it. So if I see that it's mamish tafis that ice, I'll tell them, listen, if the doctor gave you a choice to look around, try to find something that's only the rabbanon. This is mamish, it's got oxtail in it, whatever. But you have to. The first question really is why are you taking it? Did the doctor say you have to take it? And then really the answer is take something that's swallowable pill form. If possible, find something that's vegan certified, because if it's vegan certified, there's no deraisis. It's just a rabban. You're worried about maybe yayin and a few other things, but it diminishes at least whatever chashashas we have going on.
Nursing women who are taking a prenatal.
There are plenty of kosher prenatals available. Now, if a doctor tells the woman that she has to take a certain prenatal because of her situation, then let her take one that's vegan certified in swallowable pill form.
What's regarding enzymes?
Enzymes, and where? In vitamins?
No, there's they wanted for my daughter special enzymes, but they were saying, I did some research, and I saw it was made out of the stomach of a chazer.
Yes. A lot of enzymes, a lot of the pancreatic, there's a lot of enzymes that come from pig, because there's a lot of enzymatic kind of value there. A lot of medicine has that also. And that's where you get into a whole question of what the situation is. They have to take it, they take it in swallowable pill form. But it really depends on what the situation is.
The same would apply to regular medication?
Most medication has not kosher ingredients in it, but the answer is that you have to take it, just take it as a swallowable pill.
But when children have it with the sweeteners,
So by a child it's different, because a child has a din of achel sheyesh b'sakana, and they wouldn't take it any other way. But when a child gets older, once a child reaches the age where they can swallow a pill, it's better to take a pill. But a young child, you have no choice, and you have to do it. It's not.
They asked the Rebbe how are you allowed to take blood from a goy? He ate a trefus. How do you take?
What did I say?
Very interesting. It's in the Kudus Lamed Aleph from the surface of Nishmat. Rebbe said most time when you take blood from a goy, it's bekoach nefesh. You don't have a choice. It wasn't by design. But the Rebbe said it's mashma over there that if you're able to get from a yid, right,
so there's a klal. Whenever you can be memayit in the chilul, so to speak, but only in a way that's not going to present any sakana chas v'shalom. So I had a situation when someone asked me a shayla, they were taking a certain kind of medicine or a vitamin, and I said, you can look around for a better one, but you can't stop what you're doing. So just you have to transition in a safe fashion, in a safe way. This is also the Gabi, we're getting close to Pesach. I just want to touch on this briefly. If anyone has to take certain vitamins over Pesach, first of all, it's kedai to start asking the shaylas, as soon as possible, not wait till after Pesach, because a lot of times the Rabbanim have to research the mitzias. I'll just touch on a few nekudas. We're not goys or kidneys by cholim. So if something's just kidneys, if it's a cholim, for sure allowed to take it. The question is only, is it just kidneys? So the chshedim that certify the vitamins will be able to tell you if there's a chash chometz or it's just kidneys. So that's your answer. Some products are not just kidneys, there's a chash chometz in it, and even then it becomes a shayla for the Rav if it's really a situation of pikuach nefesh. In all these cases, it has to be done in a swallowable pill form only if it's adults. That's just a general call. I'll tell you a story, interesting. I spoke to a Chassidish Rav Machshir. He told me that he got a call from Rav Afrati. He was the Rav of Rav Yoshev. This story happened about 8 years ago. Rav Yoshev was at the time about 98 years old, 7 years ago. And he said, he called him up, he wants to know if this particular vitamin he's giving a hechsher on is just kidneys or also chometz. So the Rav told me, I told him it's just kidneys. So he says, Rav Yoshev took it on Pesach. He was 98 years old, he was a zaken, he was a chayla, and he didn't play any games. The halacha is, the chacham were not goys or kidneys by a chayla. Here you have the Pesach Adar by Litvish Shavel. That's what he did. In other words, my point is, he didn't play any kunsin. Shulchan Aruch, that's it.
That's a formula.
What?
Formula is most.
Formulas also, because a lot of formulas are kidneys, but again, it's ketanim, it's for chaylim, but you have to be careful inside. It's better to be careful inside your kelim, where you're going to wash them. Some mechshem l'chatchila will certify formulas. They'll certify l'chatchila as kidneys because it's anyways going to be used for ketanim.
I guess this is really a question for Rob. Hormonal medications, which is not really having to do with the chayla, that has something to do with.
Depends.
It's not necessarily why is it not chayla.
Yeah, that's right. The guy with that, it's much more. If
he
he needs a hormone, without the hormone,
fertility.
so there's no question.
It's not a question. I once got a question from somebody. A shlucha called me up. She said that someone in her family suffers from Tourette's syndrome. She said it's not really a chayla. I said, what are you talking about? I don't agree with you. I said it's an emotional issue. If they don't get treated, emotionally they're going to suffer. Chayla doesn't mean someone has a physical sickness. It could be a mental illness. It could be an emotional illness. Anything that's going to affect their functioning, if they're neifel mishka without it, that they can't function, they're chayla. The halacha is a broad definition of that. So it's not. So you have to see that also in its totality. And b'chlal, when it comes to these inyanim, we're noiter lahakil within the bounds of halacha because a person has to be b'chay b'hem. We have to be able to feed and to live and all that.
Regarding bird food.
Bird food on Pesach is a problem. Be very careful. Yeah, make sure.
What about charcoal that's bound with kidneys?
Kidneys is not a problem. You're not a manam. Kidneys is not a problem.
So it's not a problem at all.
To cook with it.
Chila 100% not.
To cook with it? You want to know what to cook with it or just to burn it?
To cook barbecue. Make barbecue.
We need to say, let's explain the shayla. The shayla is that every charcoal has a binder in it.
I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't worry about it because the
The Alter
binder.
Rebbe says, "Klor, that if it's nifsam achila,
It's nifsam achila and it's bottled but it's bottled and everything.
So then even wheat binder should be
it's
fine.
No, it's a little bit different because you don't want to have any enough from it. If it's nifsam achila before, yeah, it should be mutter. It should be mutter.
Even wheat, you said.
Yeah, but if something is coated,
For sure kidneys.
yes.
Lechatchila can make a barbecue for the
You
show.
could.
Kidneys, there's no problem. That means the most
But
popular
there are
should
some
be
things
able
that are coated. Then you have to be careful because coated you can't say
Not
nifsal
coated.
anymore
Right.
because
a binder. There's a binder in the charcoal.
it's
What
nifsal.
about wood charcoal?
There will be a chiluk if there's a.
Just don't make a barbecue for 7 days.
No, you can do it. You can do it.
Burn it
It's not a
first.
problem. Somebody asked me about using there were plates that were made with wheat starch plates. I said, that you shouldn't use on Pesach because it's mamish like be'en. Okay, there's a few other points and I'll take your questions.
It's interesting in Shulchan Aruch it says b'negiyah shurs that was starch. Interesting in Shulchan. What? The National Kitzur.
Yeah, I once had a shaila, by the way. Just 2 points. Since you're raising the discussion, Shulchan Aruch says that if you have a bayis shemanachtim by kemach, it's a problem. Like for example, you go to a bakery, it's flour all over. I was once in a factory, and they were making Pesach product in one room. at a chametz bakery in a different room, and they were transferring the Pesach product open through to another room. So it wasn't my hechsher, and I went there and I called the Rabbi Machsher. I went to my Pesach. He says, "You have to tell him." I said, "You're not allowed to do that." So they didn't. Whatever. They had to make a tikkun. They fixed it, but
The matzah bakery over here is like that.
no, it's all matzah there. It's no problem.
You're bringing it through a room with dough, flour, and water. You're taking it right through the washroom. You have the biggest problem right here.
But it's before the 18 minutes.
What?
I'm talking about over there. It's chametz gomer. It's different.
The matzah from the oven sits there until the cart is full.
Oh, then it goes back.
Once the cart is full,
Yes.
But they
it
cover
goes
it.
through all the rooms that has flour, dough,
Oh yeah,
and water.
but they cover it. Okay.
Cover the paper.
The Rebbe said, they asked the Rebbe he should go. So the Rebbe said, ich will dort nicht gehen.
That's-
Sie haben mir gar nicht gefallen side by side.
Yeah,
Everybody
yeah.
said, the Rebbe quoted them, the
Rogachover,
Rogachover.
yeah.
And the Rogachover said,
My shver told me the story. Whatever, I don't know.
the Rogachover,
It sounds juicy. Might as well finish it.
they asked the Rogachover to come to the matzah bakery. So he says, I don't want to go. I won't like anything I see. Eidach hat nemen bisur, na krin lion, the Eidach hat yendik. That's
Yeah,
it.
it's
So the Rebbe
ignorance
quoted
is
that.
bliss. It's better to not know. So that's one of the risks I have if I share too much information. If you know too much, it's a whole. Anyway, okay, just a few other points. Just Yedias Klaus. Some local vadim they consider Chol Yisrael as just a chumrah. They don't consider it as a Chol Vakim as an Isser. So they'll certify restaurants that have Chol Yisrael, not Chol Yisrael, Imi Baboy, it's the same
Where does
oven
that come from?
because they look at Chol Yisrael it's just a chumrah.
The Rav Psach was only.
They look at that's halacha. They say that's the halacha. So if it's just a chumrah, you're allowed, there's no problem with kalim. Rav Henke, by the way, held there's no problem with kalim. So they have what to rely on. We don't hold that way. So if you're going to such a place, it's not pshat that the rabbanim and machshirim are being dishonest. Chas chalila. No, they hold like they have a different mesoida. So we just as chassidim have to be aware before you eat in such a restaurant, you have to verify with the mashkiach or the rav machshir, is it all chol Yisrael? If it's mo'urev, then you cannot have any hot food there. You can go in the restaurant, you can have a cold drink, maybe a cold salad, whatever. But if it's but you have to just be aware of the risk factor and to know what you're dealing with.
When I go into a restaurant in Flatbush, and that's Chalav Yisrael, that's not, that could be wishy-washy.
In the frum neighborhoods in Brooklyn, it's not likely to happen because it's it's so nufus. But if you're going out of town to a local vad, even let's say South Jersey or maybe other places in Connecticut, you have to ask because the fact is they do both. Even sometimes in the 5 towns they'll do both. Someone I know was just there and he said that they were certifying both things. And I told him to watch out for this nikud. Doesn't mean they're not being honest. It just means that their whole way of learning is different. You have to be careful about that.
Maybe address the second.
What about using the same kalim for both? That's not an issue.
We don't allow that. That's why I'm saying you cannot eat hot food. No.
Address the second Starbucks.
Correct. So you say
Okay,
it's not-
then we'll talk about. This is another one of the fun. It's a fun industry. So Starbucks. So first of all, I have to give a disclaimer. I don't drink coffee. I never drank coffee in my life, so come to Taivas and maybe I won't be so sympathetic. I have other food Taivas. I drink Pepsi when I'm feeling tired on the road. When my wife is not looking. But anyway, so with regards to a coffee, the wife's like this. Before you get to Starbucks, it used to be, you go, let's say a Dunkin' Donuts, you go to a coffee shop, or you go to a gas station, they have a dedicated urn for black coffee, they have one maybe for flavor, they're not going to mix the urns because the flavor is going to cross over, and you just get a black coffee. It's mutter because you don't have to be, you're not choishes, you're not choishes, they're going to do something wrong. It all checks out, plausibly, you're allowed to have a black coffee. I wouldn't necessarily call it mahudr, but you're allowed to, it's mutter, finished. Now, the same was in the beginning when Starbucks first started. They were just a coffee shop. But now, Starbucks became also like a restaurant. So some of the Starbucks are more than just a coffee shop. They serve sandwiches, v'chol, v'chol. So then, hipsa and the shaila, but they're washing the kalim together with all the chazarai. This is already zichur, not kishmak. Then you have to make sure that they're washing, at least you have the soap is going to create a pegima. So probably in all cases, you have the soap as a pegima, but it's definitely not the same. It's not on the same level as getting a coffee from Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' Donuts it's not a trade for restaurant. They serve donuts that they buy, It's cold. It's all cold. They're selling. They're not cooking treif there. So I'm not worried about the kalim so much.
Wait, Dunkin' Donuts is a whole restaurant.
Yeah.
What?
Now they become a restaurant. They advertise their.
It's a full restaurant.
Sandwiches, everything.
It's the same concept now.
So then I take that back. If it's the same concept, it's not as muhuder as getting it, let's say, from a place that just has coffee. If it's just coffee, it's a lot simpler. I don't think you can say it's also to drink, but it's not muhuder because of the.
Isn't the Kafachayim makes a chiluk that that there might not be bishul akum inside bishul, but drinking in a coffee parlor, he rides on chasnus.
Chasnas, yeah, they're together. But if you're drinking it out, yeah, that's not a problem with bishul akum because the ikri is mayim. But
Why bishul on the coffee?
but the ikri ingredient is mayim. That's why it's not. On choshev should be machmer. No Shabbos. Yeah. But anyway, so, and the same, by the way, is coffee on an airplane. They're washing the cup in the hanger with everything else. Also, it's a similar. The velt.
What are they washing in
In the airplane, they use the
They're washing the coffee decanter, the urn. They're going to wash it together in the hanger once they park it in the plane. It's going to get washed.
And what about the spout, like a hot water, the spout?
Yeah. So these are all things.
Starbucks, most of them have pre-prepared foods. So it's like it's sandwiches, it's pastries, those type of things. Is that the same thing as a restaurant?
If they're not doing any cooking on premises, I wouldn't be worried.
Right.
If they're doing cooking on premises, I'm just simply bringing out a point. It's not as mahudr. Now, also with regards to Starbucks, you have to be careful about the process. If you want to get something frothed, that frothing pipe will froth non-chol Yisrael milk in a hot application, so it's a bliya. You can't froth, let's say, soy milk through it because there's already a bliya zisr in there. You can get let's say a black coffee and then pour in the soy milk if you want. But you have to be aware of that in the prat as well. There's no maras ayin in terms of going into a coffee shop because it is a coffee shop at the end of the day. But
So the
these are
fact that
things.
they steam the cup of the frother or the cup that they use to warm the soy milk, the steam alone is
The
not
problem.
good enough, huh?
No, you kashering it.
Because that's what it is. Starbucks have a metal cup, right? So in between steaming regular milk and soy milk, they put it into the frother, which is.
First of all, we don't kasha with steam alone. Kasha with steam and water. That's one problem. The other problem is the Beinoni. It's not simple to answer. It's
So you
not.
said you cannot, so basically you cannot have steamed soy milk in the store like Starbucks?
I don't think so.
But what about a shot of espresso? Number one, a shot of espresso from the machine itself.
If it's from a dedicated machine, dedicated urn, you
Even though the
could.
milk is attached to it in the corner or whatever it is, that's not an issue.
Attached in what sense?
You know, like you have a maximum, an espresso machine, you have the milk froth, the steam pipe on one side, and the espresso's from the middle.
So coffee.
But is there a connection between the two, or are there separate units?
Two separate parts of the machine.
It's all part of the machine.
I don't know if there's shared steam. I don't know. But if there's separate units, it's not a problem. I don't know if it's
Often when they make the espresso, they pour it into, they draw it into a dedicated glass cup. So that cup is just for the espresso shot, which is then poured into your paper cup. Is that an issue, or should you tell them to stick?
I had to use a paper cup.
Starbucks is putting your.
I've seen it a lot in stores that offer dairy products, milk, and soy products. They don't mix
It's
it.
possible because of allergens. Yes, I think there's truth to that.
Starbucks, the kids in
Okay, how's the kind
No, you can get an espresso. You get an espresso shot to that hot water.
Okay, now there's two more points I want to cover, and then I'll take open questions. Just two more points. A vegan restaurant, it needs hashgacha because you have teiloim, you have issues of wine, bishalakim could be an issue. But just because it has a shvacha extra and it's vegan doesn't mean we can eat there. Just keep that in mind.
Also, IKC is not a hashra, right?
What's that?
IKC is not a hashra.
Okay.
No?
And then I also want to point out, you come to a restaurant, ask the mashgiach questions. They're serving you a fancy pizza with Parmesan. It's a 6-hour cheese. You have to just be aware. Also, if you get cooked products let's say in a milchika restaurant, very possible that the French fries could be fried in the same oil as cheese sticks. Or in a fleishiga restaurant, the French fries could be fried in the same oil as chicken nuggets. So therefore, nochen lahachmer, to wait, because we hold a tafshel basar or cholov, it's considered to be like that din. That's how we fear it. Another 2 points I want to mention, I'll take open questions. It's also becoming increasingly more common, and the food industry is evolving. Now Hashem are certifying non-food products. So you see, you go in the store, you buy a pot, let's say buy a hot water urn. It says in it's Tvila because it's manufactured by a Jewish company, sold by a Jewish company, bought by a Jew. So that's the halacha. Recently, the OK certified a product, a pizza maker. Just want to be mavada so people should understand the Metzias. By Betty Crocker. We made arrangements for the from person to be the balabas, to own the product when it was made. He had a certain kind of arrangement financially. He was the owner of the product from the beginning. So therefore there's no shaila of owned by a goy. So it would avoid the tvila. So then if a yid bought directly from this manufacturer, there's no need to tvila. One second. Let me finish this. I'll finish exactly what I say. However, this is an involved shaila because there's two ways to sell it. One way to sell it is to patrol and police that it's only going to be sold through Yiddish Hand, which is how most Achshem do it. That means that they'll have a contract with the one they're giving the extra to. You can only sell it through Yiddish stores, and then there's no need to toivel taka. Kozman is biyad Yisrael. It happens to be that our Rav Paskind, and he's Mekel, he holds that even if it's sold through a non-Jewish chenveni, that means a goy buys it as a distributor, or a store owner, the goy is not buying it to use it, so they're never coined it, the bailas to use it as a keli, it's just for mischar. He holds that's not going to generate a chiyuv tvila if the original balabas is a yid. So on that smach, we're giving the hefshan on the pizza maker, even though it's being sold by Amazon. Amazon usually it's still owned by the balabas, Amazon. But the bigger problem would be, let's say, through Target, Walmart. They're buying this l'schoira, and most rabbanim that I spoke to still hold that you do have to table it. And Rav Weissman said that in a chanami, someone wants to be machber, can table without a bracha. I'm just being ma'oder that such a thing really you want to ask your own Rav for guidance, because in this prat, the Rav was mekel, but not everyone agrees with that particular position.
What does Weissman not be okay?
He's our poisik.
Really?
He's our poisik. Now he himself doesn't certify this product, and I don't think he would. But we asked him a shaila. We asked him a shaila, and he said that you could be mekel like this. Even though the OU and the Star K, they don't hold this way. So I'm just mentioning it. You can ask your own Rav for Hira in this prat.
If you're buying it from a Jewish seller on Amazon, then it's
Not a problem. But if you're buying it through a Rosh Hashanah, that's when it's...
the batch number, how do you know?
No, it says on it, okay, no tefillah required.
oh, it's not the whole product line.
No, only ones that have that label. But I'm just saying that that's based on that heter, and then if you just be aware of that. Better to buy it directly from Amazon, you avoid the problem. But if you're buying it from a Goyish store, then already it's...
Melted Parmesan cheese. 6 hours?
So melted Parmesan cheese is a machlekes, well, not machlekes per se. The Yad Yehuda is mekel. It was in the times of Yad Yehuda lived at the same time as the Pri Megadim. He holds that if you take Parmesan cheese and you melt it again and you mix it into a more of a tafshil, then the charifas goes away. I haven't seen Chabad Rabbanim rely on this heter, so I'm just telling you that we should be machmer. But the belt are mekel. A lot of people are mekel. I'll tell you a story. It happened to me. Somebody called me up. His daughter was having a birthday party. She ate like some kind of baked ziti that had Parmesan melted into it. Betois, it was her birthday. And 4 hours later, she was going to the restaurant with her friends to a fleischiger restaurant. So it was like, Nebuch, it was a terrible thing. I'm saying, I think it's like kids. But it was a big thing for this girl. She was 9 years old. So I knew of the Yad Yehuda because the Yad Yehuda holds the Charifas goes away. So really, it could be Mekel, and she was a child, whatever. So I told the Shliach that if you didn't tell your daughter about the whole musik of the 6 hours, then you for sure could be mekel, because you're not spoiling any chidduch. If she knows about it, then it's better you shouldn't be mekel, because you're going to chidduch. But Rabbi Shveit told me privately when I discussed the shayla with me, he said you shouldn't have been mekel. The belt is mekel, but I felt it was real shas tzorech. It was a real thing, and whatever. But the Under ordinary circumstances, but not maple. In the bottom.
Cheeses aren't 6 months.
Oh, so if it's real Parmesan, it's 6 hours. If it's just imitation, it's not a problem. That's already depends on how much money you're paying for your pizza. If you're paying $35,
A 9-year-old girl's getting baked pizza. You can't imagine them putting
it probably was imitation. Thank you. But if you're going to buy an expensive pizza and $30 for a personal pie, they're probably putting real Parmesan on it. So then you have that
How
shayla.
do you know something is real? The typical cheese that you buy here is the whole.
The answer is it depends on the cost. If it's a less expensive Parmesan, it probably is not real. If it's more expensive, it probably is real. Okay, any questions?
We forgot to move on to that.
Sorry?
This is good.
What about vinegar?
Well, that's not medicine.
What makes it 6 hours? Doesn't
I think you could say if you like
Yes,
it.
it does. It does.
Okay, eat it.
Today's days, you say most of the aged cheese don't even age for that amount of time.
Oh, yeah.
It's an artificial aging.
You're correct, but they do have real aged cheese as well.
Right. If you open it up and it smells really bad, you know.
They really have aged cheese. It's just not as common.
Maybe they just they infused it with.
Like you can buy a Olam product that says it aged 10 months.
So most of them do say how long it's been.
They'll have to write it. The Hechsher would make sure they write it. Because the consumer has to know it's cautious information.
Because I've seen, it says aged, it doesn't say how long.
Go to Benzies. Go to Benzies. It has all the different cheeses there.
Some Rabbanim, by the way, are machmir if they're aging it in an accelerated way, even less than 6 months. But I wouldn't say that's everyone agrees with that position. Mechal waiting 6 hours is also machlekes, but we're not machmir, so depends which Rabbi you ask.
You say most people say they.
No, we're not to wait 6 hours after when it's an aged cheese. But that itself is a yesham and shulchan aruch. It's the day that's matir it. But we were not to be machmir.
Free still pork from non-Chol Yisrael businesses. What happens to the frying pan? What do you do with it?
You have to kasher the frying pan. You could kasher it if it's not Teflon. If it's a metal frying pan, you can kasher it, but you should kasher
What
it.
about the seasoned pans?
Okay, seasoned pans, the answer is that they're sprayed with an oil and they're coated with an oil. The oil, now Rabbi Weissman gives a plaque on that. He said you have to kasher the pan, but he held that libel kal is enough. I'll explain to you why. Because the blia is only through liquid, it's only a liquid. You only choishes for oil. Therefore, he says libel kal is enough. So you put it into an oven for an hour at 500 degrees and it's kasher. Finished. Yeah, like a seasoned pan.
So what's the maskana on the coffee situation? Because that's a very touchy subject.
It is, no. So I'll tell you.
Black coffee.
Black coffee, if it's coming from a place that doesn't have a lot of cooking going on, it's more mahudr. But if it's a place where there's a lot of cooking going on, you can say it's asr, but it's better to be machmer.
But the coffee machines, first of all, most of the coffee places, the food that comes in, the majority of the time,
Yes, so then it's okay.
and the coffee, the way it's made, it's done in a press, whatever, it's not used for any of the cosmetics.
You're right. The only chashash is they're going to wash the kelim together. But again, then you have soap. If you're not choishish, you're going to wash the kelim together, it's not a problem. You're allowed to. Lalach, it's mutter. The question is only, am I choishish that they're going to mix the kelim together? If you're not choishish,
They wash everything in the same sink. It's not
together, it's a very large urn, lavdafka. Maybe they don't.
If you're getting an espresso, just a little piece when you put
That would worry me more. A large urn, they're not washing in the sink together. They probably wash it in place. They probably hold it down inside.
Where do you have this disease? I remember once I was, I don't remember where, I was in an airport somewhere or something. I asked them for their soy milk or whatever, all the different kinds of soy products they have in their coffee. And every single, they had like 10 different kinds of soy milk, soy, almond, oat, I don't know, whatever. Every single one were dairy.
Yeah, because they run a dairy kelim.
Why is it DE? It's dairy. It doesn't
The
say
OU,
DE.
no, the OU, generally speaking, does not write DE. Even on products that are not actually dairy. If they run a dairy kelim, the OU will write just the D because they don't like the DE designation. They avoid it.
What's the stock of
But D is not a problem.
I don't know.
DE is a problem
Yeah, but
because
the problem is
it's
dairy, no?
blia kolavakum.
So it's the same thing.
For us, it's the same thing. For the Welt, for them it's a machaya because they can have a DE product after a fleshig meal. Not together. But for those that don't get Paul Yisrael.
Is it really a problem that
I'm sorry?
a flesh of milk? I love it.
After a fleshing meal, they're allowed to. They're allowed to have a DE product for dessert, as long as it's not together with the flesh. Yeah. And the belt, they love it. For them, it's a big thing.
So all these, so it's really just, I was just trying to figure out the seeds. Like, how do you have
The reason is because a lot of these soy milks are made in plants that also handle milk. So to kasha the kalim is a whole big deal. They just run it all right after each other.
What's in a Shtaba for cheese company? No name. They had it in Wisconsin, and they had to catch the kalim.
Have to what?
Well, we had to catch the kalim to 12, and you only get up to 2 or 3. So I called the person who sent me, and he said that for this region, 2 or 3 is high enough.
Some people don't make them.
What? No. This was under a rice man.
Yeah.
Had a rice man was had shot.
He said for that reason it's okay.
What? He said 2 or 3 was enough.
Really?
But maybe because the region was it a mountain region or something that was higher up? I don't know.
Oh, that could be. If it's a mountain
You
region.
said before about Denver, that's not the hill?
Yeah, because as long as it's boiling, Shulchan Aruch doesn't give a temperature. It gives it says
So
moisture.
we decided to do 12.
Because in a regular sea level 212. But if you're in a higher region on a Hanama, yeah, it'll boil at a lower temperature. Yeah, that works. As long as it boils. Yeah. Okay, Chevra.
A real problem I have last week.
Kaya.
I ordered for years. Thank you.